Indeed, Johnny Ringo's life and legend are shrouded in mystery and intrigue, making him a captivating figure of the Old West. As a cousin to the infamous James and younger brothers and a rival to Wyatt Earp, he found himself entangled in some of the most iconic events of the era. What truly sets Ringo apart is his unique persona, a gunslinger with a penchant for quoting Shakespeare, adding a touch of culture to the wild frontier. While Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, and the James Younger gang often steal the spotlight, Ringo's story is one of those hidden gems of Western history. He's been romanticized as one of the deadliest gunfighters of his time, and his enigmatic character only adds to his allure. However, it's the circumstances of his death that truly cement his legend. Whether he met his end by his own hand or fell victim to foul play remains a mystery, adding another layer of intrigue to the life of Johnny Ringo. In the annals of the Old West, his name may not be as widely known, but those who discover his story are left with an enduring fascination for this gentleman gunslinger and the enigma that surrounds him. Johnny Ringo's early life was marked by both family ties to infamous outlaws and personal tragedy. Born as John Peters Ringo on May 3, 1850 in Washington, Indiana, he was the first of 5 children in his family. His connections to the Younger and James brothers added a layer of notoriety to his lineage. When he was 14, Johnny Ringo's family embarked on a journey to San Jose, California. However, tragedy struck during their wagon crossing of the country, as his father met with a fatal accident. Despite this setback, the Ringo family, like many pioneers of the era, pressed on and eventually reached San Jose, where they spent a year living with the Younger family. The details of Ringo's adolescent years between 1864 and 1870 remain somewhat unclear, with conflicting accounts suggesting he may have been a troubled youth, even leaving his family and San Jose in 1869. However, records from the San Jose Directory and Federal California Census of 1870 indicate that he was in San Jose, working as a farmer during that period. His sisters later reported that he left San Jose to join a harvesting team sometime between 1870 and early 1871. It's in the later years that Johnny Ringo's reputation as a troublemaker and outlaw began to take shape. Accounts suggest that he faced charges for recklessly discharging his firearm in a public square in Burnett, Texas. His involvement in the Hoodoo War further solidified his reputation, and from there, the legend of Johnny Ringo as an outlaw continued to grow. In September 1875, Johnny Ringo found himself embroiled in the Hoodoo War, a violent feud that erupted over cattle ownership disputes between German settlers in Mason County, Texas, and American-born residents from neighboring counties. Ringo's involvement in the conflict was not related to cattle, but rather stemmed from the killing of his close friends, Moses Baird and the severe injury of George Gladden, both of whom had become entangled in the ongoing bloodshed. Baird and Gladden had been lured to Mason by a local gambler named James Chaney, only to be ambushed in an attack orchestrated by Mason County Sheriff John Clark. On September 25, 1875, Johnny Ringo joined a group of 7 men to seek vengeance for Baird's death. Upon arriving in Mason, Ringo and a fellow named Bill Williams separated from the group and headed to Chaney's residence. There, they shot Chaney dead without warning. Subsequently, Ringo and Williams proceeded to the home of another individual suspected of collaborating in the ambush, Dave Dool. When they called for Dool to come out, he appeared at his front door armed with a gun, which frightened Ringo and Williams, prompting them to leave. They later reunited with their party and openly boasted during breakfast about Chaney's killing. According to a Texas Ranger report, one of them allegedly declared that they had made beef of Chaney, and if someone did not bury him, he would stink. 4 days later, other members of the party killed 3 more men. Surprisingly, arrest warrants for Ringo in connection with Chaney's killing were not issued at that time. However, Ringo faced 2 separate arrests in December for unrelated charges. His first arrest was for disturbing the peace in April when he discharged his pistol in the middle of Burnett. He was released after posting a $150 bond. The second arrest was of greater significance. Ringo and former Texas Ranger Scott Cooley were apprehended for making threats to kill the Burnett County Sheriff and his deputy. Fearing that their associates might attempt to free them from jail, authorities transferred Ringo and Cooley to a prison in Austin. During his journey, Johnny Ringo gained some notoriety, as evidenced by the Austin Statesman's report on January 4, 1876, which mentioned that Ringo is said to have taken an active part in the Mason County War. However, a notable point of confusion arose, as Ringo's name was often misspelled as Ringold in newspapers, contributing to the uncertainty surrounding his identity. Official records confirm that his name was indeed John Ringo. The Hoodoo War eventually came to an end, although tensions lingered in Mason County for a few more years. Ringo and Cooley were relocated once again, first returning to Burnett before being granted their request to stand trial in Lampasas County. While both were convicted and imprisoned for making threats against law enforcement, they appealed the sentence. However, they didn't want to wait until 1877 for their case to be heard, and their associates agreed to break them out of prison in May 1876. Unfortunately, Cooley reportedly passed away a month later. Despite the media portraying Ringo as a notorious outlaw on the run, he managed to evade capture for only a few months before being sent back to prison in Austin. To everyone's surprise, his earlier appeal was still processed, leading to the reversal of the charges. However, these legal matters were soon overshadowed by a murder charge stemming from his killing of Cheney. Nonetheless, this charge did not lead to a conviction, as no witnesses were willing to testify against him. As a result, Johnny Ringo was released in May 1878 and settled in Loyal Valley, Mason County, shortly thereafter. In November, Ringo experienced a change in fortune, transitioning from an outlaw to being offered a position as constable for Precinct 4 in Loyal Valley, although it remains uncertain whether he accepted the position. Throughout 1879 and 1880, Johnny Ringo continued to engage in unruly behavior wherever he went. This included shooting a man who preferred beer over whiskey and holding a poker game at gunpoint to steal the $500 held by the players. In 1881, Ringo was brought to Tombstone, Arizona to face trial for the poker game incident. However, his main concern at the time was a rumor linking him to a recent stage robbery. He attributed this rumor to legendary local lawman Wyatt Earp and his friend Doc Holliday. Tensions escalated, leading to a standoff in the streets of Tombstone, where all three men reached for their firearms. Fortunately, a constable intervened by grabbing Ringo from behind, diffusing the conflict. Nevertheless, this altercation sparked Johnny Ringo's personal interest in the ongoing feud between the Earps and the infamous Clanton outlaws. While in jail in 1882, he learned of Earp's plan to arrest the Clantons in Charleston. Ringo swiftly arranged for his bond to be processed and, upon release, immediately headed to Charleston to warn the Clantons. However, Earp's brother James observed Ringo leaving Tombstone and became aware of his plan. James wrote an affidavit labeling Ringo an escaped prisoner, with intentions to thwart the arrest of a U.S. Marshal. As a result, a second posse led by J.H. Jackson pursued Ringo. This group was intercepted by Ike Clanton, who informed Ringo of the arrest warrant. Ringo returned to Tombstone and faced trial. Once again, witnesses refused to testify, leading to his release. The situation in Tombstone worsened when Morgan Earp was shot dead by an unknown assailant in March 1882. Although many suspected Ringo, historical records from the time dispute this claim. Testimony published in the Tombstone Epitaph suggested that Ringo wanted no further involvement in the feud. Meanwhile, Earp and his posse faced additional troubles when they were accused of killing outlaw Frank Stillwell and subsequently fled Tombstone. The following day, Sheriff John Behan assembled a group of men, including Ringo, to capture the Earp posse. Johnny Ringo's death on July 13, 1882, remains shrouded in mystery and speculation. While many believe he died by suicide, some inconsistencies in the circumstances of his death have fueled theories of foul play. Leading up to his death, Ringo was reportedly seen in Tombstone and the nearby town of Galeyville, displaying signs of depression and heavy drinking. He was last seen around July 11th, around the time he left Galeyville. 3 days later, he was discovered dead with his back against a tray, holding a .45 caliber Colt in his right hand, apparently the victim of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The prevailing theory is that Ringo died by suicide, but some elements have raised questions. These include the number of cartridges found in his gun, the possible absence of powder burns on his hands, which could suggest he didn't fire the gun himself, the position of his hat on his head, and admissions from his contemporaries, including Wyatt Earp, hinting at the possibility of his murder. However, these lines of inquiry remain speculative and inconclusive. Authors like Jack Burrows and David Johnson have examined the evidence and concluded that Johnny Ringo most likely took his own life, which is a surprising and unconventional end for a legendary outlaw of the Old West.